I'd been awful alone all of my life. I lived a lonely life of crime and drugs. But you know, in that lonely hole, it seemed after that God brought that book in, I wasn't alone any longer. At 30 years old, it really started happening. He went to a wedding where they'd run out of wine, but Jesus came along and he turned the water into wine. And they drank wine all night. I thought, what a cool dude. I wish he'd come to my party. You know, every funeral he went to, he raised the dead. Even when he didn't have a boat, a raft, a canoe, not even a frog suit, and the disciples were out in the middle of the sea, he just started walking right on top of the water like it was land. You know, he could get to where they were. I thought, maybe he could get to where I am, but no. And then he went to this funeral, and I thought, oh, he can't give back to that woman her dead son, but he did. I thought, could this be true? Could it really, really be true? I thought, wait a minute. They've tried to prove it to be alive for over 2,000 years, but yet it stood. It wasn't what I was reading, but it was what I felt. I felt something fill that cell that I'd never felt before. Something I'd never experienced on drugs. I dropped the book to the floor. I closed my eyes. I got scared. I thought, hey man, if I turn another page, that mighty Christ will stand 10 feet tall right in front of me. With that open book in front of me, kneeling down there in front of the book, I thought, maybe I better pray. But I'd prayed before, shot, stabbed, overdose of drugs, ended up in jail. God, if you'll do this, I'll do that, trying to make deals with God. But it never seems to work that way. You know, my mother was dying a few weeks before. And the police came and said, Brian, your mom's dying. I said, big deal. Everybody's got to die at one time or another. I never shed a tear in 8 or 9 years. But as I bowed my head to pray this prayer, I just said, Jesus, if you're really what this book says, hey man, I'd like to be your friend. Don't take me wrong. I don't care if I never get out of jail. I don't care if I never gain a pound. As long as one day I can walk them streets of gold like the book says. I could feel as though someone had turned the sprinklers on and tears were streaming down my cheeks. I started brushing them away. I thought, oh, I'm freaking out. It must be a flashback. What's happening to me? As I got to my feet. But oh, something beautiful had happened. The real Brian I'd lost at 15 years old when drugs moved in and that real Brian had moved out. It seemed as though in finding Christ, I found myself. I felt love. I felt peace, what I always wanted. Oh, I was so light, it seemed as though I was floating around in space, but I was still scared to open my eyes. I knew I'd found this real Christ, the Christ of the book, the Christ of the Bible, the soul man that walked the shores of Galilee, seemed to walk out of that book right into my life. I looked up. I wanted to give God something. I felt so unworthy, but I thought, I've got nothing to give him. Hey, wait a minute, God, just one more thing. There is something. It's only a 118-pound drug addict, criminal. But listen, if you'd like to have Brian, here I am. It seemed as though God just scooped me up out of that cell floor into his arms. And like I could hear him say, hey man, I'm never going to let you go. I thought, ooh, that feels good. I was so happy. Oh man, I moved over in the corner of the cell. I find it hard to even find the words to let you know of what a beautiful experience it was. I lifted my hands up as tears were streaming down my cheeks. I was crying and laughing all at one time. I was acting like a holy roller and I wasn't even rolling. I said, Jesus, I love you. Listen, man, you're beautiful. I really got you. Oh, I just felt so wonderful. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. I heard something. I opened my eyes. I was still in jail, but that didn't matter. I found the real Christ. I turned around and looked, and here the guard came walking in. He looked through the bars, and he was stunned. He bumped into the bars, and the soup had spilled, and there was soup all over his pants and all over his shoes. He looked at me and said, Brian, what's going on in there? Did you see an angel? I said, nope, Jesus just came walking in. Oh, he shook his head and took off running down the cell block. He never did come back alone ever since that day. He went out and got the warden and the rest of the guards, and they lined up in front of my cell, and the warden looked in and he said, hey, Brian, I've been running this prison for 20 years, and I haven't seen nobody look just like you. They tell me you seen God. Did you? I said, As I walked over and picked the Gideon Bible up off of the floor, I said,